Edmargie Kakayurin.
Good day everyone, my name is Edmargie Kakayurin and now I will discuss the assessment flow. As an educator, the choice of suitable instruction and assessment technique to reach out to the students' learning is a significant ingredient to guarantee the students' success. It is deemed necessary that relating assessment to instruction is a cycle of address the continuous learning development and dissemination. Ibig sabihin lang nito na ang assessment ay never-ending process of progress. Ito ay data collection which is still going on. Ang goal ng assessment ay to provide conceptualization of intended learning outcomes, the description of how these outcomes are assessed and measured, also the description of the results obtained from the measures and a description of the results validated. At bilang tagapagturo, dapat alam natin ang nararapat na instruction at assessment technique upang ating makamit o maabot ang katagumpayan ng ating mga mag-aaral sa kanilang aralin. Assessment flow consists of the following. First, clearly state the plan and students' learning outcomes. Next, to organize result of the instruction and access the student learning outcomes, followed by analyze results of the assessment of student learning outcomes, and lastly, remedy the strategies employed in attaining the learning outcomes. So next, dumako naman tayo sa 4 steps of students' learning outcomes. Step 1 is write the plan and student learning outcomes, developing critical learning outcomes for students that reflect what students will do in the cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains should be achieved by teaching. They depend on the quality teaching of the course. Ibig sabihin, learning outcomes are statements of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that individual students should possess and demonstrate upon completion of learning experience or sequence of learning experiences. Ibig sabihin na ang mga estudyante natin ay may natutunan sa ating itinuturo. Before preparing of learning outcomes, we consider the following recommendations. Learning outcomes should be specific and well-defined. Step 2. Establish results of the instruction and assess the student learning outcomes. There are numerous ways of choosing and using assessment tools to determine the learning outcomes of students. It should also be distinguished that we must categorize the origins of the assessment result. It can be the product of a lesson in ability or knowledge. More focus should be placed on how the results of the assessment information are routinely compiled and organized. Ibig sabihin, we should evaluate the end record of those assessments na ating ginawa. For example, the result of test papers, written essays, and short quizzes. Step 3. Analyze products of the assessment of student learning outcomes. Evaluation and reporting of the assessment results are essential on time. The findings can be used to develop the method of teaching learning further. The technique will impact the option of teaching, methods, evaluation, approaches, speed of learning, and acquisition. Policymakers should also use the assessment finding to suggest measures to enhance service quality delivery of teaching. It is important to analyze and report the results of assessments of the students in order to draw conclusion. Dito natin malalaman kung ang assessment ba natin ay epektibo sa ating mga estudyante. Makikita natin sa resulta kung meron ba tayong babaguhin o i-improve sa ating assessment upang maging maganda ang daloy ng kaalaman ng ating mga mag-aaral. Step 4. Remedy the strategies employed in reaching the learning outcomes. Dissemination is necessary when the result of assessment are on hand. The evaluation findings would be worthless unless used a method to develop the learning process further. If there are questions about the assessment outcome solutions and changes with current procedures and policies should be proceed by the authorities and stakeholders concerned. So it means that strategies for assessing learning outcomes in general, the strategies used to the assessment are largely addressed in how to conduct the assessment on one key component in the planning process. Overall, the strategies are classified as the require actual students' behavior is measured or assessed indirect. And that's all. I hope meron po tayong natutunan sa assessment flow.
Teacher Amali May Simplina.
Good day everyone, my name is Amali May Simplina from BSED 2G. Today I'm heading to tackle the topics, types of educational assessment, and unpacking learning competencies. Types of educational assessment. May iba't ibang uri ng assessment kung saan maaaring makatulong sa bawat students na malaman kung may natutunan o nagkaroon ba ng magandang outcome ang lahat ng mapag-aralan at nalaman. Ipinapakita sa larawan ang iba't ibang uri o ang balangkas ng assessment in learning as a whole. Ito ay ang assessment for learning, assessment as learning, at assessment of learning. Alam kong may knowledge na kayo about this topic, pero akin pang mas ipapaliwanag upang mas tumatak ito sa atin. To fully determine the student's learning as a whole, the process of assessing for and knowledge must be carried out. Several tasks are assigned in each area to serve its purpose to teachers and learners. Dito natin makikita ang proseso pagdating sa pagkatuto, kung may nalaman, natutunan at naintindihan ba si students. Ito yung tumatayong mahalagang parte upang makamit yung outcome na nais o gusto. Nakalakip dito ang mga proseso tungkol sa ating pagkatuto, ang iba't ibang activities, quiz or examinations na maaari natin nasagutan o gawin para maibase ang lahat ng napag-aralan. Assessment for learning. This activity entails determining teaching and learning feedback. The assessment information can be used to plan the instruction, select student activities, and diagnose learning strength, difficulties, and causes. Information can be written or oral feedback from learners. Tulad ng napag-aralan sa unang talakayan, ang assessment for learning allows teachers to use information about their students' knowledge, understanding, and skill. In this assessment, teachers should increase the learner's motivation for them to grow as a student. Just for example is recitation, na kung saan si student ay mag-recite. After that, ay maaaring magbigay ng feedback si teacher kay student. Dito malalaman kung may stock knowledge or knowledge ba siya about the certain topic. By that, madidistinguish ni teacher yung strength ni student at mas magbibigyan ng advice when it comes to study. Formative assessment is used during the first attempt to establish teaching. Pasok rin dito yung concern mo at pag-e-examine about sa student. Tulad na lamang ng paraan ng pagtuturo, susubaybayan muna o examine kung saang paraan ba sila mas nadadalian, kung saan strategy of teaching sila mas natututo. Pamamagitan nun, mas maiengganyo o magiging interesado yung mga students ang makinig sa'yo dahil sa way ng pagtuturo mo. Assessment as learning. This activity entails self-assessment by learners when teacher will be observing student by answering questions and reflections on their tasks and learning progress. Collaborative assessment is also present among peers. Ang assessment naman nito is where the student can reflect on their own learning. O sa mas madaling salita, ito yung paglalarawan at process of learning nila. It is all about what they know, understand, and learn about. Under nito yung mga self-assessment, inoobserbahan ni teacher kung may progress bang nagaganap kay student by answering different activities o kaya kung nai-apply ba ni student yung mismong learning. Just for example, sa collaborative assessment, pasok dito yung mga group activities or group performances, paggawa ng dioramas, role plays, and jingle making. Bukod sa natututo ang mga students sa process ng paggawa nila sa certain activity na binigay ni teacher, ay nag-enjoy sila dahil nagkakaroon sila ng collaborative work. Dahil sa collaborative work ay mayroon silang pagkakataon na maobserbahan ang isa't isa at madagdagan ang learning. Dito may chance si teacher na makapagbigay ng comment or feedback, mapa-negative or positive man, but one thing is for sure, mas mabuboost ang learning by that. Assessment of learning. This will provide information about learning achievement. It will certify to what extent does the demonstration of accomplishment reach. Ito naman ay usually come up at the end of the discussion. It is assessed to know if you have encountered the teaching objectives. Sa madaling salita, dito malalaman kung na-assess ba talaga ng mga students yung learning. Kung hanggang saan sila natututo like sa pagbibigay ng summative assessment. At last, dito sila nag-gradean base sa mga nagagawa or performance nila kung pasado ba o hindi. According to BSED 2018, assessment is defined as a proper collection, interpretation, and use of information in regards of learning. He also stated that it gives the teacher a better awareness of people's knowledge and their understanding and what learning experiences are also about their skills and personal characters and capabilities. Ang pagkakaroon ng assessment ay parehong may advantage kay student at kay teacher. Din kay assessment ay nagkakaroon tayo ng kamalayan about sa iba't ibang bagay. Nagkakaroon tayo ng panibagong kaalaman at mas napapanatili natin ito. Assessment types according to function, according to BSED 2018. First, summative assessment, formative assessment, evaluative assessment, diagnostic assessment, performance-based assessment, selective response assessment, authentic assessment, and written and oral assessment. Summative assessment. It is given at the end of the instruction to certify the degree of attainment of the learning outcomes. Ang example nito ay mga midterm or final examination para malaman kung na-obtain o na-meet yung learning outcome through the term na pinag-aralan or the overall performance. Next is formative assessment. It is given during instruction to trace out the learning difficulties and progress of the learners. Example nito ay quizzes, observation, and homeworks. Ito naman ay yung process of teaching. Dito may babase yung improvement of students' learning. Parang ang pinaka-cycle ay examine student work, inform teachers' knowledge, and inform instruction to administer tasks. Pamamagitan din nito ay nagkakaroon ng ability si teacher para malaman yung strength and weaknesses ni student. Diagnostic assessment simply traces out the cases of learning difficulties. It can be given during or before the instruction. Ito rin ay isa sa mga tumutulong kay student para ma-improve yung learning experience as well as the level of achievement. Kung ano ba yung alam at natutunan nila, pero dito rin natin may encounter yung mga hindrances o yung mga sagabal para mas matuto o maabot nila yung mga mataas na standards of learning. Performance-based assessment is a process-based evaluation of student skills based on how they learn. Dito naman ay ginagamitan na natin ng iba't ibang parts ng katawan. Hindi yung utak, kamay at mata lang ang pinapagana. Ito yung assessment na yung learning, itinuturn natin as actions, like paggawa ng role plays at sayaw. Lahat ng parts, mentally or physically, ay ipinapagana. Active response assessment, a type of assessment wherein learners have to select for the correct response to question given by the teacher. For instance, matching type, multiple choice, and true or false. Dito, mas na-test yung knowledge about sa mga nagdaang aralin. May mga advantage at disadvantages din para sa mga student. Advantage ay mas madali sagutan dahil iilan lang ang pamimilian at cover na lahat ng pinag-aralan. In the disadvantage, madalas ay nagdadalawang isip tayo sa pagsagot dahil minsan ay nakakalito ang pamimilian. Authentic assessment is an assessment that assesses authentic tasks and activities. It is about call upon examinee to demonstrate special skills and competencies, applying skills that have mastered. Isa pa ay may pagkakatulad ang perform-based sa authentic dahil parehas ito ina-apply as actions. Dito din maaaring mahanap yung mga gawain na nakakatulong sa learning like the word collaborative, realistic, and perform-based. Written assessment are performed to determine the quality of the knowledge acquired by learners from a particular topic. Ito naman ay ang ginagamitan ng paper and pencil test. It can vary in form assessing student writing ability, comprehension skills, and attention to details like essays and portfolios. Unpacking learning competencies. Unpacking is the approach used to analyze student learning outcomes into components or competencies to identify the essential lifelong transferable learning knowledge and skills. The forms of learning activities, experiences, activities, and assessment fitted these outcomes. It helps us to target the different concepts such as content knowledge, reasoning, and cognitive areas and skill performance of the student. By unpacking, it shows teachers how students learn and discover through this learning process. Mahalaga na pagtuunan ng pansin ng mga learning at skill na maaari nating maisabuhay. Advantage of unpacking learning skills is that allows you to get a clear picture of the most important learning outcomes and concentrate on learning from students. Again, I'm Amalia May Simplina, and that's all for today's discussion. Thank you.
Teacher Shaina May G. Aquino.
Good day everyone, I am Shaina May G. Aquino from BSED 2G, your presenter for today. For today's topic is all about 4 parts of an ABCD objective. First, do you know the meaning of A, B, C, and D? The 4 parts of an ABCD objective. A stands for audience, B stands for behavior, C stands for condition, D stands for degree. So, let's start the discussion of 4 parts of an ABCD objective. Another procedure to consider is ABCD writing objectives. This plays an important part in the creation of smarter objectives. They are as follows. The target should not always be written in the ABCD, but it should compose all these foundation. First, audience. It describes the student or end user of the teaching-learning process. Regularly, the audience is introduced only in the lower level of an objective. For example, the course refresher participants, the TL students, and etc. Audience is the most important thing in ABCD because audience is the listener who learn through teaching. Kung walang audience, hindi natin magagawa ang ABCD objective. Audience ang lower level ng objective, ngunit mahalaga ito sa part ng ABCD objective. Isa pang example, yung mga students ng traditional way of teaching. Tinatanggap lang nila yung ideas na galing sa teacher at hindi nakakapag-share ng knowledge at experience yung mga estudyante nila. Second, behavior. It describes the learner competence. It must be measurable and observable. It should agree with the application of a real-life situation. The action must deal with the performance of knowledge or skills in any of the domains of learning: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. For instance, can write an essay. Behavior, it is about the knowledge of the students, which can be measurable and observable. Ito ay importante na nagagawa natin sa real-life situation. Halimbawa na lamang sa pagsagot ng math problems. Dito, nasusukat yung knowledge mo about analyzing and solving. Sa pamamagitan nito, nalalaman natin ang kakayahan natin. Third, condition pertains to available materials and resources that may or may not be used to complete and master the behavior. An environmental setup may also be included. For example, given a gas stove, regulator, and gas tank. Halimbawa, magaling ka sa pagsulat ng mga essay. Para ma-master mo yung tamang pagsulat, may mga factor na i-consider para maging mas better ka. Ito yung condition. Ang mga materials mo ay ang books, research, at mga application gaya ng Wattpad para ma-improve ang vocabulary. Last, degree. This method states the standard of acceptable performance, period, correctness, proportion, and quality. For example, without error, 9 of 10 items within 50 seconds. Ito yung magbe-base kung gaano karami ang naging tamang sagot sa iyong mga sinasagutan. Halimbawa na lamang kapag nag-exam ka, ang makuha mong score ay 35 out of 50. This example of a method to know the acceptable performance. We can now move on to appropriate learning target. Training target should make it a lot easier for the teacher to become more disciplined and successful in instruction, concept, and implementation. This method will encourage teacher to reflect on improving learning across the lesson and units and students. At first, the technique can seem rigid, but the experience will soon yield smoothness as with any sort of procedural expertise. Some of the difficulties the instructor or learning facilitator may encounter creating suitable learning goals. Learning goals are significant in a way that they can direct the teaching-learning process in the curriculum implementation, activity success, and outcome assessment, while there are plenty of rich target sources. Providing a mechanism is a very difficult one. The problem is how to relate it to the learners in a learning condition background. Considering the challenge raised by selecting suitable learning goals, teachers should always resort to the list of skills provided by institution for national judgment in selecting appropriate learning goals. Kung gagamitin ng mga guro ng tamang paraan ang pagdidisiplina sa mga estudyante, magiging successful ito. At ang kailangan ng mga guro ay ang pag-improve ng mga lesson para mas maintindihan ito ng mga estudyante. At isa sa mabisang paraan para mapadali ang pagdidisiplina at pag-ayos ng mga guro sa mga bagay na mahalaga ay kailangang nilang mag-ensayo pa ng mas mabuti. Sa pamamagitan nito, mas nakakabuti sa mga estudyante upang ang kanilang kakayahan ay mas ma-develop pa.
Teacher Angelo Bambilya.
Good day everyone, my name is Bambilya Angelo and I am from BSED 2G. I will discuss the 3 types of learning targets. Ito ay ang mga maaaring gawin o gamitin ng isang guro upang mas makagawa ng mas epektibong mga plano o estratehiya or better instructional decisions para mapunan at maibigay ang mga pangangailangan ng mga mag-aaral. The first one is learning goal targets. Students' awareness about the concept. Ibig sabihin, dapat malinaw at klaro sa isipan ng mga estudyante yung konsepto ng pag-aaral at kung paano dadaloy ang kaalaman ng pagkatuto sa loob ng klase. Description of what they will learn and what they will train to do on the course or degree. Dapat din ay klaro at malinaw ang pagkakaintindi ng mga estudyante kung ano ang kanilang pag-aaralan at kung ano ang mga kaalaman na kanilang hahasain at pagpapakadalubhasaan sa isang partikular na kurso. Specific expectations include the details on how to meet the objectives that cover up the subject emphasis, cognitive level of thought, and explicit language that can define the learning targets. Dapat rin ay maibigay ang bawat detalye at mga paraan kung paano maisakatuparan ng makamit ang inaasahang resulta ng isang kurso. Ito rin ay upang maisakatuparan ng estudyante ang importansya ng subject na tinalakay, kayang itatak sa isipan ng mag-aaral ang napag-aralan at kayang ibigay ang kahulugan ng mga inaasahang resulta sa kurso nang walang anumang halong alinlangan sa isipan. Ibig sabihin ay talagang naiintindihan ng estudyante kung ano yung sinasabi niya. The second one is the foundational targets. Consists of knowledge and underlying procedures. What students needs to master to achieve the learning goal targets ultimately. Ito ay ang mga pagkatuto o kaalaman na makakamit natin sa pamamagitan ng mga epektibong pamamaraan. In this type of learning targets, teachers constitute the required as a prior condition for you to successfully pass is to master the different things needed for the students to meet the learning goal targets ultimately. So there are two types of foundational objectives. The first one is the foundational targets for declarative knowledge. The academic vocabulary is necessary for regular learning. Ang target ng teacher na i-elevate or i-nurture is yung students para tumaas yung comprehensive understanding nila about sa topic or concept. Yun yung magiging target ni teacher at ma-expand yung vocabularies ng mga bata para ma-express nila ng mas maganda yung ideas na gusto nilang i-express. Halimbawa, gagawa ng essay, limited lang ang alam na vocabularies ng estudyante, di niya may express ideas niya. Isa pang halimbawa ay pag may mahirap na English, di mo magets yung message kasi di mo alam yung mga unfamiliar words. The second one is foundational targets for procedural knowledge. Specific skills and procedures are needed to implement to accomplish learning targets. Dito naman dapat ma-establish or ma-instill sa bata yung mga concept na for long-term and for future purposes. So dito na ipapatupad yan or nagagawa yan by setting learning objectives na eventually dapat matutunan ng bata. Ibig sabihin, mahalaga na may objective lang sa isang meeting or sa isang oras ng klase na may specific lang na learning competency na dapat ma-acquire kasi nga ma-overload ng mga students if sobrang dami na ina-expect na matutunan. Halimbawa ngayon, isang topic lang and then the other day, iba naman. Cognitively complex target to help students to maximize their potential understanding and to deepen the students' understanding about the topic. In this type of learning target, ito ay binuo upang tulungan ng mga mag-aaral na mas palalimin ang pangunawa sa subject na hindi lamang basta malaman ng mag-aaral yung tinatalakay kundi masumpungan ng mag-aaral kung ano ang kahalagahan nito at mas pinalalalim nito ang pangunawa natin sa tinatalakay na partikular na aralin at kung bakit natin siya inaaral. The expectation is more rigorous than the learning goal targets in measure. Surpass the expected standard outcome. Mas komplikado ito kumpara sa mga inaasahang resulta ng subject. Kumbaga yung standard expectations, dahil ang sinesentro nito ay malampasan ng mag-aaral yung mismong inaasahang resulta. Nais nitong ma-apply ng mga mag-aaral ang natutunan na aralin sa malawak na paraan. Hindi lamang sa school, kundi sa sariling buhay. Nais nitong mas gawing malikot ang isip natin sa magandang paraan na magagamit natin ang buong potensyal ng ating pagkatuto at kaalaman.
Teacher Ofelia de los Santos.
Good day everyone, I'm Ofelia Villabriga de los Santos. Competencies, objectives, and outcomes. These three words are very critical to the successful implementation of teaching, learning, and evaluation. These three is important in implementing learnings. In teaching, mahalagang mag-set ng objectives or goals sa learning process of the students to have a successful outcomes. The lack of solid understanding of the terms distinction in the teacher's aspect will be though to establish clear learning goals and enhance ambiguous on what to accomplish in the end. In this, the goals you want to achieve ay hindi mo madaling ma-achieve because of the lack of understanding. Example is, you are a student, nagsa-sideline ka or nagtututor ka. Dahil nga, hindi ka pa-graduate or hindi pa ganon ka-enhance yung knowledge mo about sa subject or the course or sa course na kinukuha mo. Hindi madaling matututunan or hindi ganon kaganda yung knowledge na naibabahagi mo dun sa student or ituturo mo. Kasi nga, hindi planted or hindi nga planado yung pagtuturo mo or walang guidance na sinusundan. There has to be some confusion about what determines successful learning performance and how it is distinguished from learning objectives or abilities. Because of the different terms used in teaching, nagkakaroon ng pagkalito kung ano yung tumutukoy o nakakaapekto sa learning o sa successful learning performance. Kung paano ito nakikilala gamit yung mga learning abilities nito. That even in education research, the use of these terms sometimes appear incoherent dahil na rin nga sa pagkalitong nagaganap. And even in finding meanings in the dictionary, sometimes can be informative. In American Heritage Dictionary, the learning terms are defined as follows. Competency, the state of quality of being competent, suitably or well qualified can do. Ito yung applied skills and knowledge used to have a successful performance or to being qualified in the course. Objectives, work towards or strive for a goal. Ito yung general statement about sa aims of a goals ng course or ng program. Outcome, a natural result or consequence. This is the result of the learning performance. In this, we will see if the learners meets the goals of the course or program. The set of expectation that we need our learners who would be able to achieve. I refer to the learning outcomes. Competencies are the collection of technical skills we needed to learn from our educational authorities based on the chosen field. It helps to have more understanding about the chosen field. Ito ay nagsisilbing imbakan ng kakayahan. On the other hand, either the student and instructor must concentrate on the aims to achieve the skills. Ang mag-aaral at guro ay dapat na maging active o mag-focus sa hangarin upang maging successful sa mga successful ang achievements ng skills of the students. In short, competency will be the foundation of a goals. Then the objectives will be the tools in order to achieve the goals or desired results. However, the learning outcomes, it is the expected learning outcomes that students should be or should achieve. Here are the illustration of an application of the competencies, objectives, and outcomes. First is competency. Students learn the function of digital inputs to establish adequate connections through the inputs-outputs ports. Through the help of the application of the knowledge and skills and also behavior, nalalaman natin ang paggamit ng mga digital devices that we use or we can use in our chosen path. Objectives. Measure the effect in digital input with the use of a pull-up resistor. In this, effectiveness of the skills knowledge in digital assess will measure. Learning outcomes. Verify the existence of electromagnetic inference. Measure data in an input port connected to different points. Understanding the importance of the pull-up resistor to avoid erroneous data readings. Usually, the example given can be treated by the competence-dependent assessment. Competency-based evaluation is the selection and assessment of evidence to decide if a person has achieved a degree of competency. The first and straightforward way will be to analyze the learning works. The learner's capacity ang nagpapakita kung na-achieve ba yung degree of competency na ang one way is to analyze the student's learning works or the outcomes. Typically, working condition make students very relaxed and they demonstrate their job-related skills to convenience. even without usual stress and follows assessment. Ito ay ginagamit upang hindi ma-pressure yung students for them to focus easily to the learnings, na kung saan maipapakita o naipapakita nila yung mga related skills nila about dun sa chosen field nila. This help observe two at the same time, as they can see, get precise and acceptable examples of behavior to be evaluated.